The dust choked the air like a living thing, thick and golden under the relentless sun. You hear it first, the low rumble of hooves, thousands strong, shaking the earth as if the gods themselves were marching. Then the screams pierce through, raw and desperate, carried on the wind from the burning city ahead. Smoke curls upward, black fingers clawing at the sky. And as you crest the hill, the sight hits you, walls crumbling under Assyrian rams, flames licking at timber roofs, and in the chaos below, women, noble-born, their fine linens torn and stained, herded like cattle by armored soldiers. One stands out, her dark hair unbound, eyes wide with defiance as chains are snapped around her wrists. She spits at her captor, but he only laughs, dragging her toward the endless line of captives stretching into the horizon. This wasn't just conquest. This was erasure, a machine grinding lives into dust. But the true horror was only beginning, the long march to a foreign palace, where freedom would become a forgotten dream. What you're about to hear involves the systematic deportation and enslavement of women, torn from their homes and subjected to lives of servitude. These events are documented in ancient inscriptions and archaeological finds, but they're disturbing. We focus on understanding the machinery behind it, not dwelling on the pain. If it's too much, step away, no judgment. For those who stay, let's uncover how one king's ambition built an empire on broken spirits. This wasn't random cruelty. This was a calculated system, designed to break nations and rebuild them in Assyria's image, far from the madness of a tyrant. It was a well-oiled bureaucracy of terror, where scribes tallied captives like livestock and generals earned promotions for efficiency. In the 8th century before the Common Era, the Assyrian Empire sprawled across the Near East, a colossus fueled by conquest. At its heart stood Sargon II, a ruler who rose from the shadows of his father's legacy to forge a new dynasty. Facing threats from every border, restless vassals in the west, nomadic raiders in the north, and the ancient power of Elam in the east, he turned warfare into an art of domination. Elam, with its rugged mountains and fertile valleys, had long been a thorn in Assyria's side, allying with rebels and harboring fugitives. Sargon's campaigns against them weren't just battles, they were purges, stripping away elites and scattering populations to prevent revolt. Historians debate the exact numbers, but estimates of deported Elamites run into the tens of thousands, many of them high-born women destined for palace service. This wasn't about glory alone, it was about control, reshaping the world so no enemy could rise again. Why does it echo today? Because it shows how power devours the vulnerable, a lesson carved in stone that time can't erase. To understand the machine, we must trace its origins, not in some distant myth, but in the forge of empire. Assyria, in the late 8th century, was a land of contrasts, vast plains dotted with towering ziggurats, rivers teeming with fish, and cities buzzing with traders from distant shores. But beneath the prosperity lurked instability. Tiglath-Pileser III, Sargon's father, had revolutionized the empire, centralizing power and professionalizing the army. He deported entire populations to mix loyalties and fill labor shortages, a policy that kept the core strong but bred resentment on the fringes. Sargon, likely born in the royal court around the mid-8th century, grew up in this world of calculated dominance. As a young man, he served in the military, honing skills in siege warfare and logistics. One formative moment came during a border skirmish with Urartu, a northern rival, trapped in a mountain pass. He watched as Assyrian discipline turned the tide, routing the enemy and carting off their nobles as trophies. It taught him that victory wasn't just killing foes, it was dismantling their societies. Another pivotal experience unfolded in the halls of Nineveh, where Sargon witnessed his brother's brief reign as Shalmaneser V. The king imposed heavy taxes on sacred cities like Ashur, sparking whispers of discontent. Sargon, perhaps already a high official, saw the cracks forming. When Shalmaneser died under mysterious circumstances, some say deposed, others whisper poison, the empire teetered. Sargon seized the throne in 722, adopting the name Sargon to evoke the legendary Akkadian conqueror, signaling his intent to rule as a true king. But ascension brought chaos. Rebellions erupted from Syria to Babylonia, fueled by those who viewed him as a usurper. In the south, Merodach-Baladan, a Chaldean chieftain, allied with Elam and claimed Babylon, mocking Assyrian might. Sargon crushed the western uprisings first, deporting thousands from Samaria, the infamous lost tribes of Israel, to dilute their identity. Yet Elam loomed, its kings like Humban-nikash providing arms and sanctuary to rebels. Sargon's paranoia crystallized here. Elam wasn't just an enemy, it was a cancer, threatening to unravel his vision of a unified empire. He began planning, amassing spies and forging alliances, turning his court into a war room. And then the spark ignited, a border raid by Elamite forces on Assyrian outposts, killing merchants and seizing grain stores. Sargon declared it an act of war, mobilizing his legions for the east. What followed would test the machine's limits, forging a legacy of terror that still haunts the ruins. The sun hung low over the Zagros foothills, casting long shadows across the valley where the Assyrian vanguard pitched camp. Dust from the march lingered in the air, mingling with the scent of pine resin and distant smoke from Elamite villages. Soldiers sharpened blades by firelight, their murmurs a low hum against the night. Among them moved Sargon, his bronze armor gleaming, inspecting formations with a critical eye. This was no hasty raid. It was the opening move in a grand strategy to sever Elam's alliances and bleed its strength. Far to the east, in the Elamite heartland, life unfolded in ignorance of the storm brewing. In a terraced palace overlooking the Karun River, a young noblewoman, let's call her Ninsianna, daughter of a high-ranking advisor, tended her family's shrine. At 20, she was betrothed to a local prince, her days filled with weaving fine textiles and studying ancient hymns. Her world was one of privilege. Servants brought honeyed dates, and scribes read tales of Elam's glorious past. But whispers of Assyrian aggression had reached even here, tales of cities sacked, families uprooted. The confrontation built slowly, like a gathering thunderhead. Sargon's scouts reported Elamite forces massing under King Humban-nikash, their chariots gleaming with silver inlays. Sargon offered terms, tribute and submission, or annihilation. Humban-nikash refused, rallying his warriors with speeches of defiance. "We are the sons of the mountains," he proclaimed, "unbreakable as the peaks." The clash came at Dare, a fortified crossroads on the border. Assyrian infantry clashed with Elamite spearmen in a whirlwind of dust and blood. Arrows darkened the sky, and the ground grew slick underfoot. Sargon's tactics prevailed. Flanking maneuvers crushed the Elamite wings, forcing Humban-nikash to retreat. Ninsianna learned of the defeat days later, as refugees streamed into her city, their eyes hollow with fear. Her father, a key advisor, urged evacuation, but it was too late. Assyrian outriders appeared on the horizon, torches ready. The act unfolded with chilling precision. Sargon's troops breached the walls at dawn, rams splintering gates amid cries of alarm. Inside, they moved methodically, looting temples, rounding up elites. Ninsianna hid in a cellar, heart pounding, but soldiers dragged her out, binding her with others of noble blood. "You're for the palaces now," one growled, his accent harsh. The horror was implied, the separation from family, the unknown fate ahead. Her father fell defending the shrine, his body left amid the rubble. As flames consumed her home, Ninsianna was marched westward, one among thousands. This wasn't about her alone. This was about the system, deporting elites to prevent leadership from reforming, scattering them across Assyria to assimilate or serve. A brief modern parallel: think of colonial powers displacing indigenous leaders, erasing cultures through relocation. Sargon's scribes noted it all: numbers of captives, values of spoils, feeding the empire's endless hunger for control. But cracks were showing. Some soldiers whispered of overreach. And in the east, Humban-nikash plotted revenge. From the vantage of a weary general, the escalation unfolded like a darkening sky. Reports flooded Sargon's tent. Elamite raids on supply lines. Alliances reforming with Babylonian rebels. The king shifted perspective, viewing the conflict through the lens of his executors, men like the field commander, tasked with implementing orders. In a dusty outpost, this officer reviewed dispatches, his face lined from years of service. "Break their spirit," Sargon's edict read. "Relocate the highborn to dilute their bloodlines." The machinery hummed, incentives for captures, promotions for officers, shares of loot for troops. It spread like fire through dry grass, emptying villages along the border. Whole districts vanished, their people funneled into caravans bound for Assyrian heartlands. One quiet moment offered a breather amid the storm. As the army paused by a rushing stream, the commander watched a captured Elamite child play with pebbles. Oblivious to the horror, it was an ironic detail, the innocence persisting even as empires clashed. Nearby, a merchant's widow from a sacked town bartered scraps for food, her resilience a stark contrast to the destruction. But the push continued, targeting different angles, not just warriors, but the societal backbone. In a highland valley, troops rounded up artisans and scribes, their skills prized for Assyrian workshops. Numbers swelled in human terms, families splintered, elders left behind. Historians estimate thousands deported in this phase. Many women of status funneled into palace service, cleaning, weaving, or worse. The system incentivized it. Reports to Sargon tallied noble acquisitions, rewarding efficiency. A survivor's view emerged from fragments, a escaped messenger recounting the fall of his town, where Elamite defenders held a pass for days before crumbling. "They came like locusts," he whispered to allies, "taking our daughters for their halls." The escalation peaked as Sargon pushed deeper, aiming to cripple Elam's core. Time slowed in the climax, the air thick with tension, as Sargon's forces encircled the Elamite stronghold. The valley echoed with the creak of siege engines, the acrid smell of pitch-soaked torches mingling with fierce sweat. Soldiers gripped shields, eyes fixed on the walls where defenders hurled stones and insults. Sargon, from his command post, orchestrated it all, a symphony of destruction. The peak horror arrived not in gore, but in the inexorable grind, ladders scaling heights, breaches widening until the city fell. Inside, the machine whirred, elites separated, treasures cataloged. Ninsianna, now among the chained, witnessed the breaking, her betrothed slain in the melee, his body trampled, implication hung heavy, the loss of autonomy, the forced march ahead. The crack appeared subtly at first, an overextended supply line, a murmur of dissent among troops weary from endless campaigns. Humban-nikash, regrouping in the mountains, launched guerrilla strikes, harrying flanks and slowing the advance. Sargon pressed on, but the error loomed, hubris in underestimating Elam's resilience. What broke wasn't just the victims, but the system's limits, logistics strained, morale frayed. In a fateful ambush, Elamite archers felled key officers, forcing a tactical retreat. Ninsianna, in the captive train, clung to fragments of hope amid the despair. The climax shifted the tide, exposing vulnerabilities that would haunt Sargon's legacy. In the wake, Sargon's fate twisted ironically, victorious yet scarred. He returned to Assyria, but in 705, on a distant battlefield against Tabal, an arrow felled him, his body lost, unburied, a curse in ancient eyes. His son Sennacherib inherited a vast but fragile realm, shifting the capital to Nineveh and erasing Sargon's name from some records, perhaps blaming his sin for the ignoble end. Survivors like Ninsianna faded into palace anonymity, their Elamite heritage diluted through generations. Communities splintered, with Elam weakened but enduring, its power shifting as Assyria's grip loosened. Long-term, the deportations reshaped demographics, blending cultures but sowing seeds of resentment that contributed to the empire's eventual fall. One ironic detail: the documents meant to glorify Sargon became evidence of his methods, preserved in clay for posterity to judge. Modern discovery brought it all to light, tangible and haunting. In 1843, Paul-Émile Botta, a French consul and archaeologist, unearthed Sargon's palace at Khorsabad, its walls etched with triumphs, including Elamite campaigns. Massive reliefs depicted captives in chains, eyes downcast, proving the scale of deportations. What it revealed, not just art, but a window into the machine, Scribes' tallies matching inscriptions, confirming thousands relocated. Botta, digging through layers of sand, felt the weight of history as Lamassu guardians emerged, their stares eternal. Later excavations added clay tablets, detailing logistics and spoils, humanizing the horror. Why does it matter now? It teaches that power unchecked devours its own, a parallel to modern displacements where systems uproot lives for control. Sargon's story warns of overreach, showing how empires rise on suffering but crumble from within. The universal truth: humanity persists, even in chains, memories outlasting stone, echoing that dusty valley. What changed was everything. Elam bowed, but its spirit lingered in whispers. Those women, meant to vanish into palaces, survived in fragments, a name scratched on a pot, a hymn passed down. They didn't disappear, and now they're here with you because you listened. If this moved you, share in the comments. What echoes of ancient terror do you see today? One final thought: in the end, the conqueror's throne crumbles, but the stories endure.